When it comes to weight loss, no two people are the same. That's why Noom builds personalized plans based on your unique psychology and biology. Take Brittany. After years of unsustainable diets, Noom helped her lose 20 pounds and keep it off.
I was definitely in a yo-yo cycle for years of just losing weight, gaining weight, and it was exhausting.
And Stephanie. She's a former D1 athlete who knew she couldn't outtrain her diet, and she lost 38 pounds.
My relationship to food before Noom was never consistent.
And Evan, he can't stand salads, but he still lost 50 pounds with Noom.
I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. Even through the pickiness, Noom taught me that building better habits builds a healthier lifestyle. I'm not doing this to get to a number. I'm doing this to feel better.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom users compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Can you tell us a little bit about Kathleen Lomax? Who is she?
Kathleen Lomax is a mom in New Jersey. She has 2 twin daughters who are 18.
That's Kashmir Hill, a technology reporter for the New York Times.
And last year, she started using Life 360, which is an app that a lot of parents like to use to kind of keep track of where their family members are, where their kids are. And she started using it because she was anxious about her daughters driving around and just wanting to know that they were safe.
Kathleen paid $100 a year for Life 360. For her, the fact that she could track her daughter's driving habits and location provided her peace of mind.
But the app also had this feature where it would tell you about people's driving and how risky they were or how safe they were as drivers. It also has this feature that can give you an alert if it detects that somebody has crashed. And this is all based on information coming from the phone. And I've been reading my stories about how automakers had started sharing data about how people drove with the insurance industry. And so she just wondered, well, is this happening with the Life 360 app?
So she reached out to Life 360 by email. They said they partnered with a data analytics company called Arity that provides personalized auto insurance quotes based on driving behavior. She would have had to opt in, which she didn't do. But the fact that Life 360 did this at all made her blood boil.
She was not happy about this. She immediately sent them another email that says, I would like to get my money back. She wanted to end her subscription to Life 360. She told her husband and her daughters to delete the app from their phones.
Life 360 said that Kathleen and her family never had their driving behavior shared with an insurance company or used to set their insurance rates. But for Kathleen, the mere practice and the fact that it wasn't clear they were doing it in the first place was enough to turn her off.
I don't think a reasonable consumer would realize this was happening from what they're told as part of the kind of opt-in process or the kind of screens they'd be shown. If you go digging in the privacy policy, you might realize it, but there's so few people that actually look at privacy policies.
Today on the show, is your insurance rate being influenced by driving data from everyday apps? I'm Shayna Roth, filling in for Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about tech, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around.
Get 3% daily cash back when you use Apple Card to buy a new iPhone 15 or pair of AirPods at Apple. You can choose to grow it at 4.4% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account through Apple Card. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility. Savings and Apple Card by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms and more at applecard.com. Get 3% daily cash back when you use Apple Card to buy a new iPhone 15 or pair of AirPods at Apple. You can choose to grow it at 4.4% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account through Apple Card. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility. Savings and Apple Card by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms and more at applecard.com.
Kashmir is the leading reporter on cars collecting data on you. She put out a story last December about abusive partners tracking their significant others through smart technology embedded in the car. Since then, she's uncovered just how much cars collect and share data on you, in part because it happened to her.
I have a car made by General Motors that I bought in December. And unbeknownst to me and my husband, it was collecting information about every single trip that we took, including how far we drove, how many times we rapidly accelerated, slammed on the brakes, or sped over 85 miles per hour. And it included when we drove. So whether we are driving at night, late night, which is considered more dangerous, or during the daytime. And General Motors had been sharing that information, selling that information to two data brokers, LexisNexis and Verisk. And those two data brokers were offering that information to insurance companies. And so that was pretty shocking for us. And again, I didn't realize that was happening. And I only discovered it because I was reporting on the topic and then realized it was happening to me.
Can you explain what a driver score is?
Yeah. So a driver score is a reflection of how safe or how risky a driver you are. And it's based on, how often you're driving, how many miles you are driving per year, how often you speed, how often you slam on the brakes, how hard you take corners, and the time of day that you drive. It's all these different kind of risk factors that insurance companies are interested in to kind of be able to predict whether you might have an accident or make a claim.
And how is it different from how insurance rates are usually calculated? I guess, what is the interplay here with insurance rates?
This is interesting. I didn't know much about how auto insurance rates were calculated before I started doing this reporting over the last half year. And it is actually pretty complicated. Auto insurers, they pull records about you. They do pull your credit score, and your credit score plays a big role in how much you pay for auto insurance. If you have a bad credit score, you're going to pay more for auto insurance. They look at whether you've gotten tickets in the past or whether you've had accidents in the past. And they also kind of look at you demographically, like what your age is, whether you're married, what your education level is, where you live. All these different factors get evaluated to determine the rate that you pay for insurance. And this new factor, this new metric is the driver score. And it's only really been possible to include that metric when people have their driving monitored in some way.
How many automakers have you found participate in sharing data with insurance companies?
I guess the question would be who's not. This really happened in the last few years. Over the last decade, cars have become connected. They become smart cars. Some experts call them smartphones on wheels, and they have internet connections or a cellular connection, and so they're able, for the first time, to kind of send information back to an automaker in real time, and that can be really beneficial for us. This is something I learned working on these stories. When you get those recall notices for your car, like there's some part that needs to be replaced. I always thought when I got that notice, it was just something generic I was getting, that anybody with that car was getting. Right. But now the automakers can get, real-time data back from your car. You might get that recall notice because your car has that problem and you need to take it in and get it fixed.
But it also led to car makers thinking about how to get paid for this data they were collecting and what other data they could potentially monetize.
And so a lot of the car makers now are collecting driving data with the purpose of sharing it with insurance companies. In some cases, that may be with your full consent. Like you get a plan with an insurer and they say, hey, do you want a discount and share your driving behavior with us? And you can say, sure. And if you have a Ford, truck, you can connect your Ford truck to the auto insurer and just have that data, run back. So most of the companies have started to build this possibility and this data sharing in. And so almost all cars are capable of this. And it's just a question of which ones are doing it and kind of who's doing it with your consent and full knowledge and who isn't.
All of this is made possible by Arity, a company founded by Allstate in 2016. For years, Allstate had been offering drivers a usage-based insurance plan. Basically, you let Allstate monitor your driving through a proprietary app for a discount on your insurance rate. Through this, they were able to collect all this data about people's driving habits. What Arity did was create a driving score algorithm using this data that determined how much money a person who drove a certain way would cost the insurance company. But Arity had a problem. They didn't have enough data.
And so Arity started offering these features through apps that were kind of driving features. There was an app called Gas Buddy that will show you where cheap gas is. And it has this opt-in feature where you can find out whether you can improve your driving to use less gas. And what people might not realize is that feature was powered by Arity. And then Arity would get the driving data from people who use Gas Buddy. And then using this algorithm it was able to look at their driving and kind of predict how much they might cost for an insurance company to insure. And then they started selling that score.
So there's this list of habits that apps and the cars themselves can track. And one of them that I found really interesting was the look at your phone habit. Speed, brakes, time of driving. I mean, those I get because the car itself can feel it. Like those are things happening to the car itself. But I mean, how would an app know when I'm looking at my phone if I'm not looking at that app? I mean, it feels, I don't want to say insidious, but a little.
It depends on what permissions you grant to an app. But yeah, a lot of these apps that are trying to judge driving behavior can kind of tell when your phone is active. So they can see that you're using the phone. And so this is a really important metric for driving. This is, called distractedness, because people that are looking at their phones while they're driving are riskier drivers. They're more likely to have an accident, to be sending a text message and then not noticing the car in front of them has stopped and then rear-ended them. So yeah, this is one of the things that if any insurance company you decided to sign up for the usage-based insurance plan and you did download their app, knowing this is going to monitor you, this is absolutely one of the metrics that they look at.
How widespread is this? When I was reading your piece and found that the Gas Buddy app was used for this purpose, I was really surprised because the two seem not quite unrelated because they're both involved driving, but a little bit unrelated. Like I wouldn't initially expect that this app that I'm using to figure out where I can get gas for cheap is potentially tracking my data on how I'm driving. How many apps are known to share data with insurance companies?
Yeah, and Gas Buddy says, hey, we're not doing this for every single person who downloads the Gas Buddy app. It's for people that opt into this driving, that turn on this driving feature. So I just want to make that clear. But Arity says that they have data for 30 million people in their kind of driver score database. And they have gotten that data from various places. The ones I know about are Life 360, Gas Buddy, and My Radar, which is a weather forecasting app.
When we come back, the tricky issue of consent. Insurance has long been a black box. Your rate is almost always shrouded in secrecy based on a myriad of factors that are often out of your control. It can be frustrating. even more so when you realize that you were unaware an app you use in your everyday life could be contributing to the rate.
I think that's why this series has hit a nerve for people because they don't know, hey, are you taking my driving into account or not? And if you are, how are you getting access to it? And that's been troubling for people. I mean, the way I first discovered that this was happening is I was seeing on forums they were kind of car forums, like people who love to go online and talk about their cars. And some of them were reporting that their insurance rates were going up. And when they asked the insurance company why, they disclosed that they had something in their LexisNexis file that was kind of contributing to their rate going up. And when they pulled their LexisNexis file, they discovered all the trips they'd taken in their cars had been reported by General Motors. And so that's how they found out it was happening. And the insurance companies say, there's a lot of things that are causing rates to go up right now. And, it's not just all about monitoring people's driving. It's the economy. It's the fact that roads are more dangerous. It's that cars have gotten more sophisticated and there's so many sensors and so much, computerized parts that even when you have a minor accident, it's really expensive to fix the car.
Talk to me about the consent piece of all of this. Are these apps or automakers asking specifically for consent before they track? I know some of them it's an opt-in, but for the ones that aren't, are they asking and letting you know before they start doing this?
Everyone I've talked to has said, we're doing this with consent and we're getting consent from people. And the apps say, hey, we're collecting this data with consent. And the insurance companies say, hey, we only use this data with consent. But, it kind of depends on what the definition of consent is in some cases. At one point, I saw a slide from Progressive where it was pretty obvious. Like you were getting your insurance quote and there was a point in the process that said, hey, we see that that we have driving data for your car. And it was a Camaro, which is made by General Motors. So not surprising that it would be there. And it said, would you like us to use this data and calculate it into your score? And so that seemed like a very clear kind of opt-in. You might not realize that General Motors had been collecting that data from your Camaro, but at least, Progressive was saying explicitly, do you want us to use this? The thing is, I've also heard from another insurer that they get the driving score from Arity and they get the consent to use it when you say that they have the right to access third-party reports about you, which is a pretty common permission to give when you're getting insurance quotes. And so once you kind of click that means that they can go and access that score. So it probably varies depending on who you're interacting with.
How did the apps respond to your reporting?
I mean, everyone says that they're doing this with consent.
Right.
And so all the apps I reported on, they said, we're doing this with consent. In one case, one of the companies says, hey, we don't even know anything about our users. Like this is a pretty anonymous app. And so we're definitely not kind of contributing to their insurance rates going up. But yeah, again, they say, people know this is happening. We tell them we're passing the data along to Arity, and they do. When you turn on these driving features, it often says like this is with Gas Buddy, for example, this kind of find more fuel efficient routes. It says this is a feature powered by Arity, but there isn't really a disclosure that says an Arity is a data broker that works with insurance companies and supplies them with driver scores. So there's a little piece that's not there and that a person would really need to go kind of searching to realize what's happening.
Right. If you don't know who Arity is, you're like, well, of course. It's got to be powered by something. And
Right.
Arity is like just this power. Like if you don't know or have no context for what that means, it doesn't really do anything for you. I'm curious, how much money are these different companies making by selling this data? Do we have a sense of how big a profit a company like Arity is making by keeping track of this data and then selling it to insurance companies?
Well, Arity is inside of Allstate, so it's hard to kind of break out what they're making. The one kind of piece of data I came across on this was This isn't the first time that Life 360 has kind of run into some reporting about its data practices. The Markup did a big report on them a few years back about the sale of location data. And within that reporting, Life 360 kind of changed how they did this. But one thing it mentioned in the reporting is that they had a deal with Arity, and that Arity paid Life 360 back in 2020, $6 million in 2020 for access to the data from Life 360. None of the companies involved would give me kind of new numbers, but that did seem like a large amount. And it's a surprising setup because, I guess it's a service provider to Life 360 and that they're providing the kind of driver safety features, but they're paying for the right to provide that service within the app because they get the data in return.
On the one hand, the secrecy and the surveillance of this practice, it can feel dark and probably frustrating for car owners. On the other hand, auto insurance pricing has, for decades, been calculated by factors that are arguably biased, things like race, gender, zip code, things like that. I mean, is collecting actual data on your driving habits really much worse than the traditional way of calculating insurance rates? Or is the problem that people are running up against not even necessarily that this is what this is currently being used for, but maybe it's this feeling that we don't want to be watched?
So I talked to consumer advocates and I thought that they would kind of just be horrified by this. They were horrified that it was happening without full knowledge and consent. They said, consumers should be aware that their driving is being monitored if it's being monitored. But, they did say this could be a better way of pricing auto insurance because the way that it's done now can be really unfair. You can have a great driving record, like never been in an accident, never gotten a speeding ticket. But if you have bad credit, you're going to pay more for auto insurance. And, one person I talked to, Michael DeLong from the Consumer Federation of America, he said, that is a big problem because the credit score system has a lot of problems, with race and socioeconomic factors, and it's biased. I think the other thing that really surprised me about this whole series of writing about how we're being secretly monitored for insurance purposes is that the reaction from some readers has been great. Like, I want bad drivers to be punished. They should pay more. There's this kind of desire for the roads to be safer. And hey, maybe if monitoring people will accomplish that, great. But what I have been told by experts is, yes, if when people are knowingly monitored, they do drive better, but they have to know that they're being monitored.
Kashmir Hill, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Kashmir Hill is a technology reporter at the New York Times. And that's it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell and Patrick Fort. Our show is edited by Paige Osborne. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate. TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you're a fan of the show, I have a request for you. Please become a Slate Plus member. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. We'll be back next week with more episodes. I'm Shayna Roth, filling in for Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.